Me personally, nah, is Eminem better than me? Nah, he not, bro.
Like, Eminem is not a better rapper than me. Like, just rap. I'm better today. And if I'm not, get up and let's rap. Let's rap. That's all I want to do is.
When that track dropped, the Black Slim Shady slid into the rap scene with the impact of a bottle shattering on the pavement, causing the culture to freeze for a moment. It delivered 10 full minutes of sharp, targeted bars, aimed directly at Eminem like a spotlight. There was no sugarcoating and no pulling back. This wasn't some random diss track floating around the internet. It felt like a full-scale production, a staged, heavyweight face-off presented for the world to see. The game didn't step into the booth just to rhyme. He stepped in as if to test the stability of a legend's throne, and you could feel the reaction ripple through the room. A history of tension. Let's be honest, the game has always carried that king energy. Back in the G-Unit era, he never held his tongue, consistently calling out who was authentic, who was acting, and who the industry had sidelined for too long. For years, he has been outspoken about feeling overlooked, even while delivering classics like The Documentary and Doctor's Advocate. Consequently, when the Black Slim Shady arrived in August 2022, it didn't land like a casual jab. It struck with the force of pressure that had been building for years, finally breaking open. The game had watched other legends get crowned, while his own name began to fade into the background, and he clearly wasn't willing to stay quiet about it any longer. A calculated challenge. He made a move most artists wouldn't dare mention aloud. He went straight at Eminem, stepping into the arena with absolute confidence. What made the event even more surreal wasn't just the lyrics, but how calculated the entire piece felt, from the sound design to the structure and the attitude driving the track. This was not a rush studio freestyle or a quick insult tossed out to shake the internet for a day. The game arrived fully loaded with voices, skits, impressions, and wild flow switches that kept listeners locked in from start to finish. He played with Eminem's style, flipped his rhyme patterns, tapped into their shared history with Dr. Dre, and even satirized the troubled genius persona often attached to him. Essentially, he took the concept of Eminem and reshaped him into a character within his own story, rather than treating him as the untouchable icon the world usually reveres. Moves like that are bold in any era of hip-hop, but in today's climate, it felt like a direct, undeniable challenge. And then, silence.
Challenge. Hey, challenge it.
Game, you don't want to go versus against
Yes,
Eminem.
I do. What do you mean? Yeah, I do. The fuck you mean? So what you trying to say? Hey, let's just say what you're trying to say. You trying to say that I don't want to head or fade with the white man?
Eminem's complete lack of response hit harder than any bass drop. The silence itself became a critical talking point. Some argued it proved the game hadn't landed a significant enough punch, while others swore Eminem was simply staying above the fray, choosing not to descend from his legendary status to trade verses. Regardless of the interpretation, the silence sent intense ripples through the culture. Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube exploded overnight, with reactions, theories, and frame-by-frame track breakdowns. Everyone demanded answers. Was Eminem secretly cooking up a reply? Was this about to become another Rap Devil versus Killshot scenario similar to the Machine Gun Kelly situation, or was Eminem simply brushing the game off as something he didn't need to address? The debates became intense quickly, with people arguing non-stop about what that lack of response truly signified. The origin of the conflict. To fully understand why the game even chose to enter that lane, why he felt the urge to push that button, we must rewind the story. The tension didn't start with the track. It had been simmering long before, bubbling under the surface through early 2022. During a Drink Champs interview, the game ignited a firestorm when he stated unequivocally, "M is not better than me." He made the statement without blinking. That single line instantly fractured the internet. Hardcore Eminem fans dismissed it as reckless talk, while others maintained the game had every right to speak his truth. From the game's perspective, the statement wasn't shocking. It made perfect sense to him. He wasn't necessarily knocking Eminem's technical skills, but rather discussing the full package, the lived experience, the street-tested credibility, the versatility, the catalog, and the authenticity that runs deeper than just sharp rhyme schemes. The moment those words left his mouth, you could feel something heavy beginning to build. So, when he announced his album, Drillmatic Heart vs. Mind, fans anticipated a few light jabs. Not a full 10-minute centerpiece aimed directly at Eminem like a spotlight. The Black Slim Shady was not some random back and forth. It was a full, open challenge, and the game didn't hide that fact for a second. In the interviews leading up to the release, he made it clear he genuinely wanted Eminem to respond. He wasn't dropping hints, he was calling him out directly. He expected a reply because he knew Eminem's history. The legendary artist has almost always reacted when someone steps into his lane.
You do all that shit, Eminem. And I used to think Eminem was better than me.
So what you saying right now?
He's not.
This explains why the game approached the entire situation with confidence, practically daring one of the sharpest battle rappers alive to step out and meet him on the field. The game even threw out a bold statement: "If M doesn't respond, then I win." That line alone instantly split the culture down the middle, delivered with complete conviction. He didn't hold back, challenging Eminem's skill set and diving into subjects fans usually consider personal, including his family, his struggles, his legacy, and the public image Eminem has cultivated over the years. Some listeners felt he pushed boundaries, while others saw it as a calculated strategy, a reminder that battle rap never comes with soft edges and is meant to be intense. The chess move. Beneath all the shock value, one big question persisted. Was the game genuinely trying to prove he was superior, or was he trying to pull the spotlight back his way? His name still carries weight, but his recent albums hadn't impacted the culture the way his early classics did. Therefore, when he took a direct shot at Eminem, one of the biggest figures in hip-hop, many viewed it as a serious chess move. To some, it looked like smart strategy, a way to force the entire industry to bring his name back into the conversation. To others, it felt like a desperate reach wrapped in clever bars. Regardless of the interpretation, the move worked. Reaction channels dissected every second of the track, hip-hop pages covered it non-stop, and every comment section became a fiery debate about the game's intentions. Whether people thought the track was razor-sharp or too drawn out, everyone was suddenly talking about him again. The game understood this better than most artists, recognizing the simple rule: attention is still currency. Analyzing the silence. Eminem's silence instantly became the centerpiece of the whole storyline, and the culture continued to circle around the same question: why didn't he respond? Some speculated the game wasn't worth the pen time, while others claimed Drillmatic hadn't landed hard enough to warrant a comeback track. However, a louder theory began to gain traction. Many fans believed Eminem might have learned from the Machine Gun Kelly situation. When Eminem clapped back at Rap Devil with Killshot, he arguably gave MGK the biggest visibility boost of his career. Perhaps this time, staying quiet was the smarter chess move. Here's the wildest part: Eminem's silence didn't end the moment, it actually stretched it out, keeping the conversation alive everywhere. Fans began dissecting the silence as if it were a hidden message. Was it respect? Was it hesitation? Was it simple indifference? Every new theory added more heat to the debates, and the mystery kept people locked in. The result. Meanwhile, the game maximized the spotlight, dropping interviews, releasing visuals, pushing the album harder, and reminding everyone of his history. He has stood against 50 Cent, thrown indirect shots toward Jay-Z, and faced entire camps like G-Unit without flinching. Why would Eminem be the exception? That competitive context is why the moment hit so heavily. Whether you viewed the Black Slim Shady as a creative power move or felt it dragged on too long, it had the entire rap world buzzing non-stop. The game essentially forced hip-hop to pay attention. He flipped Eminem's silence into a full spectacle that nobody could ignore. Eminem's fan base, one of the most loyal and intense in music, reacted immediately. They flooded the game's comment sections, engaged in like-dislike battles on YouTube, and filled the internet with breakdowns defending Eminem as if it were a mission. They argued the track was overly long and the disrespect was purely for attention. On the flip side, many fans stepped up and argued that the game reminded everyone of a crucial hip-hop tenet: no rapper is too legendary to be challenged. They maintained that hip-hop's competitive energy shouldn't fade just because someone has reached icon status. Some listeners even called the track a throwback to the older era, a crafted diss filled with storyline. The track was not just random shots in the dark, it was intentional, layered, and designed to pull listeners in, featuring character acting and skits that gave it personality and structure. It wasn't reckless disrespect. It was calculated, a direct tap on a sleeping giant, and the game knew exactly what he was doing. Media outlets ran with the story, and every podcast weighed in. Headlines popped up everywhere. Did Game push it too far? Should Eminem stay quiet? Is this Game's last big swing? Whether people thought he was reckless or quietly respected the audacity, he had their full attention. That alone was a major power move. This entire situation went far beyond who had the sharper bars. It became a contest of boldness and the guts required to shake the system. The game threw a challenge toward a throne most rappers wouldn't even dare look at, and by doing so, he placed himself squarely at the center of the conversation. Eminem's silence turned into one of the most intriguing parts of the whole saga. The lack of a direct reply became its own storyline, a piece of hip-hop theater that fans dissected, searching for deeper meaning. Through all the noise, the game kept pushing forward with full confidence. He repeated that if Eminem didn't respond, the silence itself was the answer. Some called it a reach. Others argued he was creating a moment that would be discussed for years. Regardless of which side one favored, one thing was undeniable. The Black Slim Shady shook the culture. It turned one track into a debate that lasted for weeks, proving that in hip-hop, the boldest move isn't always the knockout punch. Sometimes, it's just having the courage to step into the arena to begin with. That level of courage is what made the whole moment so intense. The lingering questions and aftermath. Even though Eminem never officially jumped in with a direct response, fans swore they caught small hints tucked inside his later releases. When Curtain Call 2 dropped, Eminem released a remix of Crack a Bottle, and some listeners pointed to a couple of lines they felt might have been aimed at the game. They weren't clear-cut diss lines, but subtle, intentional flashes to some, especially since Eminem is known for calculated, layered wordplay where nothing he says feels completely random. Still, no full diss track followed, and that silence kept the culture buzzing like a live wire. The bigger question began to float around. How did this moment reshape the game's image? For one, it pulled him right back into the center of the spotlight. Before the diss, he wasn't heavily trending, and Drillmatic wasn't impacting the industry as he had hoped. After dropping that 10-minute lyrical challenge, everything flipped. Attention snapped back his way, streams climbed, old interviews resurfaced, and his name began popping up everywhere again. YouTube reactors who hadn't mentioned him in years suddenly returned, breaking down his bars like detectives digging for clues. Every punchline was replayed, rewound, and analyzed, giving him real momentum back into the conversation. Even people who weren't fans of the game were still tuned in, and that kind of attention holds immense value. However, a move this bold did not come without pressure. The industry split quickly. Some radio personalities and bloggers argued certain lines, especially the mention of Eminem's daughter, felt unnecessary and too personal. Others claimed it made the game look like he was trying to shake someone else's throne rather than highlighting his own achievements. Then came the Dr. Dre factor, a major element in the story. Dr. Dre is the thread connecting both Eminem and the game, the man who helped launch both their careers. By going at Eminem, the game was indirectly touching Dre's legacy. And many longtime fans were uncomfortable with that, feeling he was stirring a pot that should have been left alone. A quiet backlash began to creep in, whispers, subtle comments, and shifts behind the scenes. Some playlists allegedly started skipping Drillmatic. Certain platforms seemed less eager to promote the game's new interviews, and a few opportunities reportedly faded out. Nothing was officially confirmed, but the timing made many people raise an eyebrow. When you go at someone with Eminem's reach and influence, silence doesn't always signal things are smooth. Sometimes that silence means the room just got colder, and the game around you starts shifting in ways you don't immediately see. In this industry, quiet does not always equal peace. Sometimes it is pressure building behind the scenes. But even with all that energy circulating, the game never flinched. In every interview and appearance, he stood by his words with a confident grin, as if he already knew the exact reaction he wanted to spark. He admitted he understood the strategic move he was making and enjoyed watching everything unfold. To him, this wasn't just conflict, it was strategy. He was hitting the right switches, shaking up the space, and pulling the spotlight straight back onto his name. For a while, that strategy truly worked. Drillmatic didn't skyrocket to #1, but thanks to The Black Slim Shady, the album garnered far more attention than it ever would have on its own. The diss track gave the entire project a storyline that listeners could follow. Even people who disliked the track still clicked play just to see what all the noise was about. Ultimately, the risk was huge. This was not a new artist chasing a moment. This was a veteran with a long track record, and his legacy wasn't something to gamble cheaply. If the move had fallen flat, it could have looked like desperation. If Eminem had completely ignored him, it could have made the game seem irrelevant. That is exactly why the debates became so heated. People couldn't agree on whether the game had made a genius strategic play or walked himself into potential career damage. That split, that fundamental division in how people viewed the situation, is what kept the conversation alive far longer than most diss tracks ever last. Fast forward to 2025, and the Black Slim Shady still hasn't faded from rap discussions. It lives on in comment sections, podcast debates, and every conversation about the nature of modern rap beef. It wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was a statement stamped into rap history. Looking back, people are still debating the ripple effects of what the game pulled off. On one hand, he made a bold, calculated play for attention and reminded the culture that he is sharp, strategic, and unafraid to go at giants. He didn't just drop a few slick lines, he constructed a full, theatrical diss aimed at one of the most respected rappers alive. That is not mere clout chasing, that is legacy talk. The strategic cost. Yet, even big moves come with a cost. The Black Slim Shady ended up overshadowing virtually everything else on Drillmatic. The album itself was strong, with some fans even calling it his best work in years, but casual listeners were fixated on that one track. The entire rollout was swallowed by the controversy, leaving the rest of the song standing in the shadow of a diss that never received an official response. That imbalance shaped how people remember that era. The situation didn't ruin the game's career, but it didn't launch him into a new peak either. His core fans remained loyal, respecting the courage it took to step into that arena. However, mainstream media framed the entire moment as a Game versus Eminem storyline, replaying old rivalries instead of focusing on his growth or the depth of the full project. Some critics argued that the Game looked stuck, still trying to prove something instead of letting the music speak for itself. The diss became the headline, the hook, and the talking point, and everything else, no matter how well crafted, had to fight for attention behind it. Unwavering confidence versus calculated silence. Through all the noise, the Game never backed down. Throughout late 2022 and all of 2023, he stood firm in every interview, repeating with full confidence that he truly believed he could out-rap Eminem. He didn't soften his stance, walk anything back, or switch his tone, and that consistency made the whole story even louder. His energy never wavered, and that alone kept people watching. Eminem's approach, conversely, was the complete opposite. No diss track, no subtle sneak lines, no coded bars beyond what fans thought they heard. Nothing. He remained focused on his own work, anniversary drops, surprise features, and live shows, all while the conversation about the Game lingered in the background like a shadow he never acknowledged. Depending on who you ask, that silence was either a masterclass in starving an opponent of attention or a missed chance to go bar for bar with a real challenger. The 2025 verdict. So, what is the verdict in 2025? Honestly, it's complicated. The Game didn't lose. He stood tall, stayed consistent, and refused to fold under pressure. He didn't fade out or vanish. He kept touring, kept dropping music, and maintained his respect within the culture. He took a risky swing at a giant, and the mere fact that he stepped up stamped him as one of the few artists bold enough to do it. But at the same time, it wasn't a clean win either. He never got the response he wanted and never turned the diss into a full mainstream comeback. Eminem's fan base didn't ease up for a second. And yes, some doors might have quietly closed behind the scenes, especially with that Dr. Dre connection sitting in the background like a silent referee. In the end, the diss track turned into something bigger than just a song. It became a cultural checkpoint, a reminder that hip-hop is built on competition, confidence, and the courage to call out legends when you feel that fire in your chest. The Game tapped the throne and still stood tall through all the smoke. Was it reckless or genius? Honestly, it was both. It was risky, loud, controversial, and carefully planned at the same time. And that's exactly why, even years later, the conversation still won't die. The Game didn't just challenge another rapper, he challenged the system itself. And even without a direct reply, his voice echoed across the culture like a flare shot into the sky.